What do you think are the most common reasons where you say no to people?
Well, there are a number of different reasons. I'm trying to think if there's one common one, or it really very much depends. One thing is, do we believe in the market opportunity in terms of, what is the competition out there? Is this really as differentiated as the founder thinks? Sometimes it's more on our side, it's because we as a fund, we need to see a certain timeline before we can exit. And we need to see that the capital requirements, as you just mentioned, are manageable. So these are sort of on our side boxes that we need to check. Doesn't mean that we don't like the opportunity. It just doesn't fit with the way we invest, our investment strategy, and the way our fund is set up. One thing that we often see, actually going back to sort of a common reason, is that it's basically too early. It's sort of too early in the research stage, which means that we see the timelines and are too long for us, and the risk is too high. So we want to see a bit more data. We need the project to mature a little bit before it fits our investment strategy.
But that's super interesting to use as an example, because if we take, and I know you probably know some cases we can use as a reference case, because if you look at sort of a biotech company, it can be like a dead animal on the stock exchange for 10 years. And then by 2 months, it jumps up and becomes the best stock performing ever, right? So just explaining the timeline, right? So if you get a case in your meeting, is it like you're often saying this is maybe a 10 to 15 year time horizon, and we have to return our capital in 5 years? Because maybe you can, for people who are listening, maybe they don't understand the investment cycles, right? And how you need to return on capital from your side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a typical, setup of our fund where we are supposed to, within a certain investment period, invest, exit, and return capital. So that's sort of the structure of our fund, and we need to sort of work within that framework. So that is often the case that, there's an interesting opportunity, but it's a little bit too early. And many of these opportunities we track for a long time, and they will come back to us, after a couple of years. And that is the right stage for us to engage. So when we talk to founders, it's rare that we say, no, thank you, never, ever. It's more sort of, thank you for presenting this with us, let's stay in touch and let us know when you've come a little bit further.
Is it possible to have you give some references into your portfolio companies and what problems they are solving, and also maybe some best practices? Or is it too early to say in your portfolio companies which problems they are solving and how they are solving it?
Oh yeah, no, that's it's all of them have a defined problem that we're solving. So maybe take one investment that we made, and this is actually within the digital health space, which is sort of a big trend. A Finnish company called Neuroevent Labs, and they are focused on epilepsy patients. And what they're doing is that they are recording epilepsy patients with video and audio, and are then analyzing, over a longer period of time. They can analyze and annotate and classify seizures, and thereby create a much better picture of how an epilepsy patient is treated, how well that epilepsy patient is treated. And it's sort of basically replacing or can assist healthcare professionals and give a much broader picture in terms of following how the epilepsy develops, or how a patient is treated. It can be used both in hospitals and in the patient's home. That's one thing. Number of the other companies we invested in are developing new drugs for diseases, such as, oncology is an indication that we have a few companies within. We have a radiopharmaceutical company based here in Oslo called Akay, and they are treating spreading of disease to the abdominal cavity. And they're using a radiopharmaceutical that basically radiates the metastasis cells.
I think it's so interesting as well, because when you're talking about these cases, if you especially look at the digital cases, right, maybe having an assistant or machine learning or whatever, right, like COVID has to be this like extremely massive tailwind that suddenly forces people to try new products, right? You see so many examples of like almost you force people's hands to try this new technology. So how's that been being in this space, seeing that people are forced to try to innovate?
Yeah, it's a very good point, and that's one reason for why we're sort of turning our attention a little bit more to this space as well. It's not a new space. It's been in development. It's been an emerging space for many years, but it's been slow to develop. Healthcare systems are slow to change and very conservative. But that's exactly that. What we're seeing as well, that the pandemics are sort of forcing people onto digital platforms, and they've been able to see that, yeah, it's actually working. So that is sort of catalyzing now a few of these opportunities that we see in the digital health space. So it's definitely sort of an area that's growing.
If you had to mention some problems you wish more people try to solve, what are those problems?
There are so many brilliant people working on so many problems. So it's rather the other way around. Sometimes we have founders coming in and say, hey, I'm working on this and nobody else is doing it. And, you go and Google a little bit and you say, there's actually quite a few people working on exactly that problem. What I'm seeing in the space is that a lot of resources, especially from the strategic side, have gone into oncology. So oncology is a space that generally has been taking a lot of focus and attention, and there's a lot of research going into that space. And I see that some other indicators, some other areas are getting a little bit more attention now also from the strategics, especially within sort of neurology, for example. So, the focus on the different indications are shifting a bit. I think that one sort of classical area that has been a bit neglected, though, I would say, is women's health. That is an area that has received less attention than it should. And that's something where we see that more players are trying to focus a bit more to bring that area up to speed.
That's a brilliant point. And I also think, if I can just add one, I think also if you look at mental health, right, it seems like it's been super conservative. So you're actually using the same medicine like during the world wars, right? And that doesn't seem like the best way going forward. But obviously you see in the US, you're starting to getting allowed to experiment. Like there's a lot of things coming up, right? And especially in the US, but that seems like a field which should have a massively overhaul in terms of what are the options, right?
And that's actually falls within neurology. So that's mental health within neurology. That's I fully agree. That's an area that hasn't had that much development, but is now getting more attention. I think one of the reasons for that is that it's harder to develop drugs in that space than it has been sort of within, for example, oncology. And that has sort of made many players focus on lower hanging fruits, let's put it that way. But there's definitely a huge potential there within neurology, mental health, neurodegenerative diseases, like, for example, Alzheimer's, etc. Huge potential.
But that's very fascinating. So is it, just to try to translate a bit for people, so is it also so hard to develop medicine for your, let's say, mind, because we don't really understand the brain at all? And it's hard to have placebo and environment. So it's very hard to move the needle, knowing that you're moving the needle.
It's hard to measure. It's much easier to measure when you know what's going on, when you know the biology of it, and you can measure it with a blood test. is much more black and white than what many of the things are within neurology and also mental health space.